this all up. The Committee on House Administration will come to order. I note a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I'd like to thank my colleagues for their attendance for day 2 of our committee funding hearings. In consultation with the ranking member, we're going to move right into today's business. Today we'll hear from the chair and ranking members of 10 committees, beginning with Chairwoman Kathy McMorris-Rodgers for the Energy and Commerce panel. We're going to then continue as we did yesterday. We will be giving 5 minutes to the chair and the ranking member for opening statements, then 5 minutes each for the majority and minority to ask questions in total, as we did yesterday. Cognizant of time, we're going to dive right in. Thank you for being here with us, Chair Rodgers, and we'll yield to you for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Morales. To all the members, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of the Energy and Commerce Committee's funding request for the 118th Congress. Our request reflects the anticipated needs of the committee's majority and minority to best fulfill our Article I responsibilities. A well-functioning legislative committee is the best way that we assert our Article I powers on behalf of the people that we represent. I'm proud of ENC's rich history of plowing the hard ground necessary to legislate, deliver results, and improve people's lives. Millions of Americans are depending upon us to tackle today's greatest challenges, so they have the opportunity for a brighter future. I'm also grateful for the relationship that we have built, that I've been able to build together with the ranking member now, Mr. Pallone. It's a relationship that's built on trust, because I know that when that trust is when the magic happens, and it's foundational to everything that we do. Last Congress, we worked closely together to maximize every penny of the committee's budget so both the majority and the minority could meet their needs. We also worked to improve how the committee operates. For the first time in the history of Congress, we held a bipartisan staff retreat. And while Frank and I disagree on many things, we always agree to be good stewards of the committee's resources to better energy and commerce, the House, and deliver for taxpayers. Our committee has hit the ground running. By March 31st, Energy and Commerce will have completed 31 committee activities, including hearings in the field and Rayburn, markups, roundtables. We've managed 5 rule bills on the floor, including the first open rule this Congress, which considered 78 amendments in real time. In addition to supporting the fast pace to produce quality legislation, our request would give additional resources needed to increase our oversight capacity, improve member involvement, modernize how we operate, and retain high-quality staff. There's several highlights of our funding request that I'd like to share with you today. Number 1, boosting our work to conduct oversight and investigations of this administration and woke corporations under the leadership of Representative Griffith. He's our subcommittee chairman of Oversight and Investigations. In addition to more staff, I've identified software to scrutinize more than $500 billion, half $1 trillion that we've identified that is within our jurisdiction. This software would help us track this spending and really help us expose waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm committed to organizing more field hearings and site visits. There's no substitute for the members actually going on the ground outside of Washington, D.C. to hear directly from those that are impacted. Last month, we held 2 field hearings in Texas where we had the participation of 20 members from both parties. Our ability to significantly increase these activities is really a matter of resources. I'm thrilled that Chairman Stile established a subcommittee focused on modernization efforts. I've requested funds to work with the CAO to build software which would drastically improve our productivity and effectiveness and hopefully becomes software that will help all committees. For example, the ability to create dynamic letter tracking and automated notices would significantly improve our oversight and investigations. Finally, the quick and dramatic increases in the salary cap for House employees last Congress has really significantly changed the employee marketplace. You know, the starting salaries for new staff in the 118th Congress is averaging between 6 to 12% higher than budgeted. Our budget request reflects these higher salary expectations for current staff and future hires to make sure that we attract and retain the best. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of our funding request and look forward to answering whatever questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chairman McMorris-Rogers. Ranking Member Pallone is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morelli and members of the committee, and in particular Mr. Griffith, of course, who's a member of our committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on the proposed budget for the Energy and Commerce Committee for the 118th Congress. I'm pleased to join Committee Chairwoman Rogers here today and thank her for seeking me and my staff's input in the preparation of the proposed budget request. As you know, the Energy and Commerce Committee has the broadest jurisdiction of any authorizing committee in Congress. It legislates on health care, biomedical research, safe food safety, clean air, climate change, safe drinking water. The list goes on. And with this broad jurisdiction, last Congress, 2,515 bills were referred to the committee, and of those, 26 measures became law as a result of the committee's work. And while that number may seem low, most measures included a compilation of dozens of bills. In fact, the committee was extremely productive in the 117th Congress. All 5 of the major laws that were signed into law last Congress, the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the fiscal year 2023 Omnibus, included key provisions from the committee. And these laws will modernize our nation's infrastructure, lower health care and prescription drug costs, make unprecedented investments in climate action, tackle rising inflation, and boost American manufacturing and competitiveness. We also had major bipartisan wins to combat the mental health and substance use disorder crisis, keep dangerous products off the market, make communication devices more secure, and ensure drugs and medical devices are safe and effective with the reauthorization of the FDA user fee program. Now, these were major achievements that are going to make a real difference in the lives of American people, and it's now critical that we ensure these legislative achievements are being implemented by the administration as Congress intended. Our proposed budget, which requests a 14% increase in funding for the committee above fiscal year 2023 levels, will greatly assist us in fulfilling our legislative oversight and investigatory duties over the expansive areas within our jurisdiction. The Energy and Commerce Committee has a long and proud history of bipartisan collaboration in the spirit of serving all Americans. In order to advance the committee's goal, it's critical that we retain a strong and experienced staff. Over the last several Congresses, the institution has taken tremendous steps to increase staff pay across the board, instituting minimum annual pay of $45,000 for junior staffers and boosting the maximum pay for senior staffers. And these pay increases are essential to attract and retain a diverse workforce that remains on Capitol Hill. In order to keep experienced staff, we have to continue to boost staff salaries to be competitive with federal agencies in the private sector. Otherwise, the legislative branch is at a distinct disadvantage, and we simply cannot allow that to happen. So, longtime committee staff who intricately know and understand the legislative history of the laws that previous Congresses have passed are critical to ensuring that the legislative intent of these laws is known over time. And this legislative history can't be underestimated, and I think is vitally important for the committee and the Congress. Staffers with investigative expertise in particular are critical to our oversight of the administration and industries within our jurisdiction. So we also have to ensure that the committee staff have the tools they need to do their job. This includes access to essential technical support and subscriptions to informational resources of current affairs, policy, the law, economic trends, and technology. So I want to note that last Congress, I made the decision to move away from an unfair and unworkable budget ratio that traditionally splits the committee budget between the majority and minority 2/3 to 1/3 respectively. Instead, I provided the minority with 40% of the total committee budget. And this agreement worked well last Congress and is a more reasonable approach to the needs of both sides, in my opinion. And I'm pleased that Chairwoman Rogers has committed to retaining that new split this Congress. Chairwoman Rogers and I will also continue to work together to reduce and consolidate our costs wherever possible and as proactively as we can, while also promoting a committee culture of accountability and respect for the American taxpayer. And I think the committee has a lot of work to do over the next 2 years, and I firmly believe this funding request will provide us with the resources we need to get the job done. And I just join with Chairwoman Rogers in voicing my strong support for this budget request. And thank you again, Mr. Chairman and the members of the committee for hearing us this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Pallone. The majority and minority will now have 5 minutes each to question the witnesses. I'll take the 5 minutes and yield immediately to the esteemed member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairwoman McMorris-Rogers, you talked about it a little bit in your testimony, but explain why field hearings are so important and how it's different than just doing it in Washington, D.C.
I think field hearings are extremely important. It makes all the difference to be able to go to a member's district, to a state, and see firsthand what the issue may be. We saw that last week, or the week before last, when we were down in McAllen, Texas, on the border, focusing on fentanyl and the issues around fentanyl that's coming across the border, and then being able to go to Midland, Texas, and highlight American energy and how foundational American energy is, and to have Republicans and Democrats join in these field hearings, see together, hear the stories, and see firsthand makes all the difference.
And it's not just that the field hearing is in a different location, it's that on top of the hearing, you can also go and visit sites like we did when we were in McAllen. Is that correct?
For sure, yes. We were able to go, so you don't just have the hearing, but then we were able to go down to the Rio Grande River and after the hearing, late at night, and be able to see the activity at the river in real time. It makes all the difference, and I think it's an extremely valuable piece. And we'd like to do a lot more field hearings. The reality is they also cost a lot more money because you're taking on a lot more expense around the travel and just beyond here.
But you believe that that's money well spent to
Absolutely.
Educate the members of Congress, both on the Republican side and the Democrat side?
For sure, no doubt
Absolutely.
about it.
Now, you also talked about tracking.
Yeah.
Oh,
Could
go
I
ahead.
just add, if you'd yield to me, in the last Congress when I was the chair, because of the cost, I was reluctant, as you know, to have field hearings because I just thought we didn't have enough money. So, I mean, there's no way.
But you also had to deal with the COVID issues.
What's that?
You had to also deal with the COVID issues, which
Well,
made
that's
travel
true. Yeah,
difficult.
I guess you're right about that. I hadn't thought about that. But what I'm saying is that I knew that we were going to have a hard time doing field hearings because of the lack of funding. So I just totally agree with Chairwoman Rogers that if we're going to be able to do more field hearings, which I think are important, we are going to need more money. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do them.
Right. Now, you also mentioned in your testimony, Chairwoman Rogers, that you wanted to be able to try to track the $500 billion in new spending that's under our committee's jurisdiction, and you were going to work on the modernization side to get the software that's right and so forth. But that costs money as well. Can you elaborate on what the committee has identified so far and what level of assistance you are looking for from the CAO to provide help in this endeavor?
Yes. Well, it is. We're talking $500 billion that we've identified of new spending within this committee's jurisdiction. So it is energy and climate, new spending around energy and climate, public health. We're going to be at the forefront of pandemic preparedness, as well as doing the review of the response to COVID and how we prepare for the next pandemic. Big tech. And also the record-breaking investment in closing the digital divide and broadband spending. So that's all part of that $500 billion. And having the staff as well as the software necessary, I think, is critical. Obviously, it's a lot of money.
Let me shift to staff.
Okay.
So in order to be able to track all of that, the committee is going to need additional staff to help out, say, on oversight, because already we're doing numerous letters trying to track that money, but the letters just don't magically appear. It takes staff to help draft them and then members to go over them and so forth. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, we have some extraordinary staff with expertise that have been a part of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee. But the reality is, with this especially with the additional spending, so many agencies and boards and commissions that have more spending, it takes the staff to do the follow-up and to really understand the details and be able to ask the questions and make sure that we're holding them accountable.
And it's my understanding, either one of you can answer this, it's my understanding at one point in time when Chairman Dingell was chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee of Energy and Commerce. He had over 100 people working on oversight. Is that something that I see staffers saying that's right, but do you all recall that? Mr. Pallone, do you recall, Ranking Member Pallone, do you recall that?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you, well, maybe you don't remember, but I do, but I mean, the majority of the work of the committee at that point was oversight.
Yeah. And so your request might be a little shy on the number of people needed.
Sounds like it. I think I need to amend our request here.
I appreciate it, and I yield back to the chairman.
I'm not going to ask what year Mr. Dingell was chair of a subcommittee at Energy and Commerce. I now take 5 minutes, and I'll yield to Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will say the comment by Mr. Griffith spoken like a true member of the Energy and Commerce Committee in terms of increased allocations. But and I do want to I appreciate everyone being here, Chair McMorris-Rogers and Ranking Member Pallone. I do think, just as I'll say this public service announcement, I think the staff here are amazing in the House. I don't think there are enough of them to support the incredible work we have to do. And I know people are always conscious about spending money and taxpayers' dollars, but to get a real value out of the Congress, I agree with you, Mr. Griffith. I think we should all be thoughtful about how, that is what you were saying, I think you said, so I want to agree with you. But thank you both for being here. Thanks for your incredible work and a committee that is clearly critically important to the House. And I want to, if I can, Mr. Pallone, I do want to commend you for your leadership as chair in addressing the inadequacy of the split between the majority and minority. I think it was very commendable. And I think, you know, just to casual observers outside of Congress, I think they would agree that the 1/3, 2/3 split, I think what people would just intuitively say doesn't seem fair, considering the ratios of the committee or the full House. And in practice, a deep discrepancy makes it hard for the two sides to operate appropriately and frankly to cooperate, which is what we'd like to see more of, bipartisan cooperation on as many issues as we can. But I understand that that's not the only limitation on the funding split, and I appreciate certainly the chair agreeing to the old 60-40 split. But I wanted to just ask you, is it true that the committee, the total amount of the staff slots is part of the issue here? It's not only the allocation 60-40, which you've agreed to, but the 2-to-1 split makes it hard to actually have the 60-40 materialize. Could you just comment on your perspective on that, Mr. Pallone?
Yeah. As you suggest, but maybe I should make it clear if you don't know, though you probably do, that you know, the budget is one thing, and the idea of a 2/3, 1/3 is not set in rule or regulation, right? So in other words, Chairwoman Rogers can say, okay, I have this budget, and you know, I'll do 60%, and you, Ranking Member Pallone, can do 40%. She can decide that, right? So it's the 2/3, 1/3 is just custom, you know what I mean? And we could change it, which we did when I was chair, and she's agreed to do in this Congress. But the same is true for the slots, right? In other words,
Yeah,
if
just
you don't
so just for in terms of clarification for anybody who might be paying attention, it's the dollars are allocated 60-40, but the slots, which are
well,
the
it's
number
similar.
of headcount, is
It's
not.
similar, Mr. Morelli, in the sense that if you don't increase the number of slots the way you increase the overall budget, then she doesn't really have the ability to do a 60-40 split with the slots either. You know what I'm saying? In other words, the problem is that you've increased the budget over the years, but you haven't increased the slots, and so we have money that we can't reallocate based on the slots. She could say to me, okay, we're going to do the slots 60-40, but if she doesn't have an increase in the number of slots, then she, practically speaking, can't do that because there's only so many slots. Yeah. And so what we're basically saying is that we'd like you to increase the slots at the same level that our budget increases this year. So we would ask that the committee add an additional 12 slots, bringing the new total to 134. And then she could split those slots in proportion 60-40 if she desires, if we agree to do that. Otherwise, she has more money, but she can't give me more slots because she's got work to do, and she can't just say, okay, I'm going to give you more slots, because then she won't have more slots.
Yeah, and
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I feel bad. I probably should have asked you, Madam Chair, first, because we're talking about you like you're not in the room. So, would you comment on that, how your perspective on it as well?
Well, and I'm very much a fiscal conservative, and to my Republican colleagues, I would just appeal to you that it takes, in order for us to fulfill our Article 1 responsibilities of oversight and exercising the power of the person, holding the administration, Article 2, all of the spending within the federal government, for us, in order for us to be effective, we have to have the people. Consider how much spending, we're talking money, it's also a lot of people within the federal government, boards, agencies, commissions, and for us to be able to fulfill our responsibilities, we have to have the people to be able to do it.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I thank the chair and the ranking member for joining us today. Your testimony is very helpful in regards to our markup next week. We're keeping this brief and quick today, but we appreciate your time here and your commitment to joining us and returning the House to regular order and transparency to our taxpayers. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
I can really see my bald spot in this. Have that removed.
Chairman Gallagher, Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, thanks for joining us today. This is our commitment to returning the House to regular order and providing transparency to taxpayers. You'll each be given 5 minutes for an opening statement. There'll be 5 minutes of questioning in total, 5 from the majority, 5 from the minority, to question the witnesses. To keep us going, I'm going to yield immediately to Chairman Gallagher for 5 minutes for the purpose of an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Style. Thank you, Ranking Member Morell. Thank you for inviting us to testify here today in terms of the budget for the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party in the 118th Congress. We had a first hearing last night, and it was a very bipartisan event, and we're off to a good start, but of course we need resources to proceed. My partner on our committee, Ranking Member Raja Krishnamurthy, and I are both aware of the current constrained budget environment we face. So therefore, the work we do must be efficient and effective. We need to be efficient and effective with taxpayer money that you provide to us. As you will see in our submitted budget documentation, this budget would build and resource the entirety of the Select Committee from scratch. This includes salaries for 24 majority staffers and 12 minority staffers, as well as planning for and traveling to approximately 4 field hearings each year. Mr. Krishnamurthy and I are aware of the challenge facing our committee. The Chinese Communist Party poses a serious and highly complex threat to the future of the United States. I would argue that this competition, this fight, is existential. In all areas of geopolitical competition, be it military, be it economic, be it diplomatic, the CCP is working to undermine our national interests. With the resources provided to this committee, the committee will work to 1, restore supply chains and end critical economic dependencies on China. 2, strengthen the military to build a credible deterrent to prevent conflict. And 3, end the CCP's theft of American personal data and intellectual property. And 4, work to address the human rights violations committed at the hands of the CCP. And finally, 5, make a compelling argument to the American people that the CCP's techno-totalitarian state is a danger to the values of the free world, among other important work we must do. This, as you can tell, is no small task. Our committee will play a central role in driving China policy in Congress and working with the standing committees of jurisdiction to do so. My staff and I are committed to delivering actionable policy recommendations that will safeguard U.S. national interests and reduce the threat of the Chinese Communist Party. Please accept my thanks for your time and your consideration of the committee's request, and I yield back my 2 minutes and 53 seconds.
Thank you, Chairman Gallagher. I now yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. Krishnamurthy, for the purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Style, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify before you today regarding the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. and our budget submissions for the 118th Congress. I want to begin by thanking Chairman Mike Gallagher for his leadership as well as his collaboration. We are trying to create a genuinely bipartisan effort, and I think last night illustrated that. We've been working very closely with the majority staff on a number of issues, including this budget. And as you know, we're starting from zero. We're building from scratch, from ground up. So as we work together to meet the challenges posed to this committee, I'm very pleased to join Chairman Gallagher in supporting this funding request. And of course, as you know, the challenges that we're trying to deal with are pretty serious. The CCP poses major economic and security threats to our nation as well as to democracy and prosperity around the world. Those dangers are clearly illustrated by the CCP's threats against Taiwan's democracy, its theft of hundreds of billions of dollars worth of American intellectual property, and its numerous human rights abuses, including transnational repression of people here in the United States who have the temerity to advocate against, for instance, the genocide against Uyghur people in the People's Republic of China. Using the resources provided to this committee, we will study and develop the policy tools we need to protect our nation and outcompete the PRC through developing our high-tech and manufacturing sectors, upskilling our workforce, strengthening strategic cooperation with our partners across the Indo-Pacific region, and countering the CCP's anti-market policies that hurt American workers. We will pursue this agenda while rejecting the dangers of xenophobia, suspicion, and division in America, which the CCP not only welcomes, but also actively works to sow in our society. The tasks before this committee are significant, but Chairman Gallagher and I know that the budget that we have proposed will enable our committee to deliver the actionable policy recommendations necessary to ensure the security and prosperity of our nation in the face of serious threats from the CCP. Thank you again for your time and consideration of our committee's request, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair and ranking member will now each control 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions. I'll start with myself. Mr. Gallagher, you're starting off with a new committee. Last Congress, I was the ranking member on a select committee with then Chairman Himes on economic disparity and fairness and growth. You're the only committee that has a reduction in budget in the second year. And I think in large part that stems from the fact that you're really standing up and creating a new select committee that's never existed before in the House. I want to dive into some of the challenges you face, in particular on the recruitment of staff, where many committees come in, they are already having a standing staff, they're coming into a kind of a rotation period. You're building this out of scratch. Could you kind of comment on what the challenges are you're facing? Because there's got to be really specific areas of expertise that you need regarding supply chain, intelligence, et cetera.
Well, first, Mr. Chairman, let me say how grateful I am that you were willing to sit down with me from the start and just talk about lessons learned in running a select committee. It's not easy, particularly when you're dealing with an issue that transcends really every standing committee's jurisdiction. And so I really appreciate that. And your staff has also been phenomenal in working with both of our staffs in order to make sure that we're able to kind of build the plane as we're flying it. The challenges range from the highly mundane and practical of where do we actually conduct our business, where does our staff work. You've been great in accommodating that space. To the how do we get equipment on the cheap. We've tried to be very efficient in actually taking old equipment from a previous select committee that operated in the last Congress. And then to your comment on staff, obviously we need to balance two things that reflect really our two core functions. One is we want to be the speaker and minority leaders policy incubator and accelerator for smart, strong, bipartisan China-related legislation in this Congress. But the second, because we don't have unique legislative jurisdiction, and in some ways more difficult and more important, is we want to have a strong communications function. We want to communicate to our colleagues and the American people why they should care about the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party and why this is a threat that affects all Americans. So we have benefited from a lot of expertise that has come from other committees, but you're right. We're having to recruit a lot of people with highly technical, highly specialized knowledge. The final thing I'd say is, on the economic component of this competition, in my mind, that is the most complex. I know we all deal with it, you on the Financial Services Committee. Finding really talented people that can understand how we de-risk our supply chains from China, how we put in place adequate safeguards for American capital going to China, that's hard. It's not cheap. You need really talented, experienced people.
I appreciate that. I think this is going to be an ongoing dialogue this Congress. I think it's really important that we get this right. I mean, you have an incredibly important area of jurisdiction here as we work in particular on the supply chain side. And I think one of the challenges we see with some of our select committees in particular on the hiring of really critical and thoughtful staff is that the duration of time that you can offer employment is 2 years. It's a little different than some of our other more traditional standing committees. Although maybe somebody's an employee at will, there's a likelihood that that individual, if proven productive, is going to be able to maintain a longer period of time and have a career. I think it's one of the challenges we face with our select committees, where that term of service has a specific end date, and sometimes it's harder to recruit really talented people into that. One of the things I'd like you just to encourage you is to continue that dialogue in particular with this committee where we can be helpful as you're looking to operate and get stood up, because getting your committee stood up operational out of the gates, I think is going to be essential to the success of this Congress and making sure that we're dealing with the strategic threat posed by the Communist Party of China. I'll reserve the balance of my time and I'll yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. Morelli.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, and Chairman Gallagher and Ranking Member Krishnamurthy. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your good work as you begin to address a clearly strategic threat to the United States. And I was at an event back home the other day and said what I often say, which is I'm not sure at any time in American history our economic security and national security are more completely aligned than they are today. And so the work you have to do and the work in front of you is important. It's also important, in my view, that to the greatest degree possible, Congress speak with a single voice on the world stage, internationally, as well as to the American public about the threats we face. So I appreciate your work. I have very few questions. We're moving this along pretty quickly, but one I do want to ask relative to the distribution of resources, and this would be directed to you, Mr. Chair. I want to just get assurances that when it comes to the minority, in terms of their allocation, that they'll have be unimpeded in their desire to spend the resources that they have without any interference from the majority, and I'd ask for your commitment to that.
You have my assurance on that, Ranking Member Morelli, and I appreciate that. And I hope in our early going that you'd hear from the Ranking Member that we've been fully transparent and above board. There was a request for additional resources in terms of staffing on the minority side that we tried to accommodate. We've also shared some of our IT resources, so we're going to look for efficiencies. You know, we're not naive enough to believe that we're going to agree 100% on everything when it comes to this strategic competition with China, but we're looking to identify, you know, what is the 75% that Congress can speak with one voice on, what's that 75% of the world can support, and I think we'll reflect that in our daily practice and how we allocate resources.
And I don't know if the Ranking Member wanted to comment on that relationship as well.
Yeah, it's been terrific. Thank you for asking about that, Ranking Member Morelli. And, you know, I think that Chairman Gallagher and his staff have been a pleasure to work with and have really tried to, you know, we started just a little bit later than...
I don't believe your mic's on. We can hear you fine, but I don't believe anybody on a live feed would be able to hear you.
Sorry, the Chinese could hear, I'm sure.
The tens of viewers.
Don't underestimate the Committee on House Administration. Chairman Gallagher, in particular, before the markup on the budget.
Strike the last one, whatever.
Strike the last word. No, but just one other point that makes our hiring slightly more technically complicated is I think both of us are trying to hire Mandarin speakers as well so that people can be able to read the original text of what the CCP actually issues. We want to be as insightful as possible for you, the members of this committee, but also our colleagues, and try to put before them the very best information we can from original sources. So that kind of complicates the hiring as well.
No, I appreciate that, and I would just also join with the chair in offering our support as you go through this important journey and your important work, and with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Chairman Gallagher, Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, thanks for joining us today. This is our commitment to returning the House to regular order and providing transparency to the American people. Congratulations on your hearing last night. We look forward to big things from the Select Committee this year. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chairman Thompson, thank you for joining us here today. Thanks for joining our commitment to returning to regular order and restoring transparency to the American people. We're giving our witnesses 5 minutes to make an opening statement. The majority and minority will each then have 5 minutes to ask questions regarding the budget request. I will jump right in and yield 5 minutes to your opening statement. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Thompson.
Chairman, thank you so much. Well, good morning, Chairman Stowe and Ranking Member Morelli. And members of the committee. First of all, I'd like to just, my ranking member sends his apologies. He's not able to make it, so I'd like to ask unanimous consent to be able to submit for the record his written testimony.
Without objection.
I appreciate that. Thank you for inviting Ranking Member Scott and I here to share the Committee on Agriculture's bipartisan proposed budget for the 118th Congress. As Chairman, I commit to ensuring this committee maintains its storied history of an effective and financially responsible body. The approaching expiration of the Farm Bill legislation impacting the nation's entire agriculture value chain and, quite frankly, our communities across the country, rural and urban alike, requires our shared prioritization. As many of you know, farm bills require a tremendous effort every 5 years. Ongoing impacts related to supply chains, the crisis in Ukraine, and fluctuation in commodity prices and input costs further complicate our work. From members, staff, and stakeholders' education to policy development, our immediate agenda impacts every member of this chamber. This task and backdrop is our chief motivation in requesting additional resources. Personnel is imperative to our preparation and execution of hearings, listening sessions, roundtables, program audits and accounting, legislative drafting, and economic modeling and forecasting. We also need resources for extensive travel, including at least 6 bipartisan Farm Bill listening sessions across the country, among other activities outside of D.C. Additionally, there are multiple reauthorizations and legislative priorities outside of the Farm Bill that require dedicated staff, not to mention a heightened workload due to pandemic-related packages and their outstanding implementation. Each intensify the committee's mandate to protect and serve rural America and consumers across the globe, and each require extensive travel outside of Washington, D.C. to hear from the individuals impacted by every decision we make, from farm to nutrition, research to rural development. Shared in the committee's questionnaire, we are seeking a 10% increase for staff salaries and related activities. These additional resources will allow both the majority and minority to attract, maintain, and reward staff, something of extreme importance to both of us. The institutional knowledge of the committee and its members relies heavily on the expertise, education, and diversity of the staff serving it. Unfortunately, the committee budgets have yet to recover from decreasing between 2012 and 2016, but they also have not kept pace with outsized inflation, both of which continue to plague our ability to attract and retain highly specialized employees. Frankly, we're not able to compete with the executive branch or the private sector and struggle to retain staff. We certainly have a lofty agenda ahead, and we'll work tirelessly to enact that agenda with tenacity and financial responsibility. And we appreciate your consideration of this request, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thompson. The majority and minority will each now have 5 minutes for questions. I'll begin with the majority's time. Uniquely, this year, the Farm Bill comes up. It's once every 5 years. It's got to be a pretty different year in your committee. The funding request is actually only up 5% over the previous year. This is where a lot of the action takes place in your committee. Could you kind of just walk through how this is going to be different from a funding perspective for this year, or do you view that steady state as being appropriate?
No, actually, an increase is warranted when you look at, well, the baseline of, and there was an announcement today of and this tends to happen, but the timing could have been unfortunate for Mr. Scott having, I think, a number of staff who are seeking greater opportunity in the executive branch, and I'm not sure, maybe somebody's going downtown. I'm not sure everywhere they're going, but I know the USDA was one of those places, and that tends to occur from time to time. And that's kind of the baseline of what we're doing. But then you look at the Farm Bill year, where you need the expertise. We need to bring in talented folks. We need economists, to be able to look at the economics, short-term and long-term, on the policies that we put forward. And that's an expertise we have to invest in. When you look at the you know, the need of, and we've always traditionally done this, it's not something new, but in addition to doing intense hearings here in Washington, we're doing Farm Bill listening sessions, which is a fairly efficient way of achieving things versus a, you know, formal hearing. But it's getting the voices from across rural America. We've always done those, and as I said in the testimony I presented, we're looking at the need for at least 6 of those. It needs to be regional around the country because agriculture, where it shares a lot of things in common, quite frankly, there's a lot of differences regionally, and we need to be able to represent that as we work on this, you know, this language that will be that will serve not just the our communities and those who, I like to phrase it this way, those who produce, those who process, and those who consume. Well, that would be everybody, you know, across this country.
Thank you very much, and never shortchange yourself on dairy expert as we go into the Farm Bill here.
Amen.
In a serious sense, if I can go from the big picture into a little bit on the mundane, I know inside your budget you have around $140,000 for subscriptions. For both sessions. One of the things that this committee is going to be committed to this cycle is looking for ways to save taxpayers money, and where we have a lot of committees engaged in subscription services and other committees doing it separately, looking for kind of economy of scale. Does anything jump out to you in particular that you may benefit that other committees are engaged in a similar manner?
Yeah, it's, I mean, the subscriptions are incredibly important, right? I mean, that allows us to be able to respond to the issues immediately as things come across our desks. And we do appreciate, I believe it's the enterprise subscription system, which provides a lot of different resources. There are 2 in particular that fall outside of that. If that could be encompassed, the Bloomberg, BGov, and Political Pro would, in the scope of what we do with our committee, would be very helpful to have that. You know, these subscriptions, it's challenging, right? It seems like there's a difference of what committees have to pay for compared to a member's office. And so those 2 in particular certainly stand out.
Thank you very much. That's something this committee is going to look into. Appreciate your testimony. I'll now yield 5 minutes to be controlled by the ranking member, Ms. Morelli.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Nice to have you here. I agree that the incredibly important work of the Agricultural Committee grows even larger when you have the Farm Bill to consider, so appreciate all the hard work you have to do. I come from upstate New York. I notice you're having a field hearing in New York. I don't know where, but I hope it's upstate. And I remind people all the time, and they may find this surprising, that depending on how you sort of measure it, agriculture is either number 1 or 2 industry in New York State.
That's right.
Which I don't think people often think of us as an agricultural state, but we are. And my region is certainly right in the center of that agricultural activity. So appreciate your hard work. I just want to quickly, in addition to putting in a plug for upstate New York as part of your field hearing, want to, you had indicated in your written submission to us that you would follow the practice of not impeding in any way the minorities' ability to spend their allocation. I assume that you're going to be committed to that rule.
Yeah, absolutely. We are very blessed to have just a long-term great working relationship with Ranking Member Scott. And so the allocations would be, and this is a bipartisan proposal, so, and it's basically on precedent of what we've done.
Very good. And I'm going to take my cue from the chair and just ask for a much more mundane question, which is, in the last Congress, I know we created a process by which field hearings would be conducted where we bring in things like the Sergeant of Arms, Capitol Police, the Clerk's Office, all sort of coordinated together to help reduce costs of those hearings. Is that the process you expect to use when you're conducting your field hearings?
Yeah, we want to do it in a very efficient way. Obviously, as we're planning, laying these out, they're strongly bipartisan, and basically want to replicate what we did in past farm bills, and specifically in the 2018 Farm Bill, which was highly effective, bringing the voices of American agriculture to the table, so that they have a voice at the table as we prepare this bill.
Right. Thank you again for your hard work, for your work with the ranking member, and wish you all the very best. And with that, I'll yield back.
Chairman Thompson, thanks for being here today. You got a big year ahead of you with the Farm Bill. We appreciate all the work that you're doing and all the work that you're about to do on behalf of all of America's farmers. And if we're making pitches for field hearings, keep Wisconsin in mind. But in a serious sense, we appreciate your time here today, your commitment to reestablishing regular order and transparency to taxpayers. Have a wonderful day.
All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Chairman McHenry, Ranking Members Waters, thanks for joining us today. This is our commitment to restoring regular order to the People's House and transparency to Americans' taxpayers. We're going to move along pretty quickly. We'll give each of you 5 minutes for an opening statement. Then myself and the ranking member will each control 5 minutes to ask questions of the witnesses. We appreciate you being here. And without ado, I will yield to Chairman McHenry for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Morelli. Members of the committee, very glad to see 1, 2, and a third member of the Financial Services Committee on this committee, and good friends and colleagues across the board. And I appreciate you giving Ranking Member Waters and I the opportunity to present our budget request for the Financial Services Committee. We're at a pivotal moment for our financial system and the economy as a whole. Ranking Member Waters and I worked together to develop a thoughtful request that reflects this reality and allows us to deliver on the critical work we will undertake this Congress. We're requesting a 5% increase from the 118th Congress. This request is based on our massive workload that focuses on issues that directly impact all of our constituents. We've provided specific details about how these additional resources will be utilized in our written documents. I'd like to briefly walk you through a few examples that highlight why this additional funding is so important. Too many Americans feel unheard and cut off from the legislative process. Field hearings give us the opportunity to meet our constituents where they are and help show members the unique needs of different regions of the country. But they require time and money, from travel, which is more expensive now, and lodging, which is more expensive now, to research materials and production. It's my goal for each of our 6 subcommittees to conduct a field hearing to hear the diverse viewpoints across the U.S. using the new funding. Next is staff. Hiring and retaining talented staff to work on behalf of our constituents requires paying them a decent wage. We know rampant inflation has made the cost of everything rise, including wages and labor. Additionally, changes to the rules governing staff pay that were put in place last Congress put further pressure on wage inflation for congressional employees. Job creators in the private sector have been reeling from these challenges, and the House is no different. In light of this inflationary environment, a 5% budget increase to cover staff salaries alone is a very modest request. I'd also like to discuss the pressing issues I intend to address this year and how this increased funding would help the committee achieve its objectives. Advances in technology have benefited consumers, but they've also created gaps in our consumer financial data privacy laws. We must modernize and strengthen our existing protections to ensure consumers control their data. Last night, the committee considered my Data Privacy Act to do just that. The second pressing issue is enhancing capital formation opportunities, just as we did a little over a decade ago with the Bipartisan Jobs Act. It is my hope that we can build on the successes of the Jobs Act to deliver the type of growth that has proven enduring. That was a bipartisan bill. My hope is we can have a similar bipartisan package this Congress. Finally, digital assets. Americans have lost billions of dollars in digital assets due to bad actors. This technology also has the potential to bring more Americans into the financial system and hold the promise of the next building blocks for the future internet. It's our job as legislators to provide clear rules of the road for this technology to protect consumers while allowing innovation to thrive here in the United States. I think we can achieve that balance, which is why I created a subcommittee on digital assets chaired by Congressman Hill of Arkansas. Digital assets are a new technology. Bringing regulatory form to these assets will require extensive education of members and staff alike, not just on the committee, but off the committee as well as a great deal of oversight of this marketplace. Both of these priorities require us to have the staff expertise and educational resources necessary to make solid public policy. Republicans will also return the committee's attention to responsible but rigorous oversight of the executive branch. Oversight and investigations require a great deal of resources, including hiring top-notch oversight attorneys and the software, like Clearwell, that is needed to process and analyze enormous document productions. Let me conclude with this. The next 2 years of policy will set the terms of debate for the next decade in the Financial Services Committee. The Financial Services Committee is ready with solutions to foster innovation and create economic opportunities for all Americans, but we need the resources to deliver. And so with that, I'm happy to answer questions, but I would like to thank the ranking member, just as she reached out in the 2 previous Congresses when I was ranking member to make sure that we have a similar budget request and we have alignment before the House Administration Committee. I'm grateful that she reciprocated in that relationship as well. So thank you to the committee members, and happy to answer your questions. And I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman McHenry. Ranking Member Waters is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Style and Ranking Member Morelli. I'm pleased to be testifying alongside Chairman McHenry this morning to discuss the funding needs of the Committee on Financial Services. This is my second tour as ranking member of the committee, having previously served from 2013 through 2018. Given this previous experience as ranking member and my more recent experience as the committee's first chairwoman, I believe that I have a unique perspective on the committee and the funding level it needs in order to be effective. Our committee splits its funding without restriction, with 1/3 for the minority and 2/3 for the majority. This split has been very helpful in budgeting and meeting our needs, and I see no reason for it to change. The Committee on Financial Services has jurisdiction over our nation's financial institutions, capital markets, housing programs, monetary policy, and certain aspects of our nation's national security. These issues are highly complex, yet critical for the effective functioning of our nation's economy. So, as a result, the committee must and has, under Democratic and Republican leadership, undertaken strong oversight of our nation's financial and housing systems. We're also on the front lines of any economic crisis. During the 2008 subprime meltdown, our committee was at the forefront of passing legislation to save our financial system from imploding, and several years later, we enacted legislation to prevent any future financial market meltdowns. Under my leadership as chairwoman, our committee once again was called upon to draft and pass legislation to protect the economy at the onset of the pandemic, and later to improve its implementation, including by strengthening the PPP program so that more community development, financial institutions, and minority depository institutions could fairly participate. Later, I worked with Chairman McHenry to secure historic capital and emergency investments into these institutions. And when a wave of evictions threatened to create millions of new homeless Americans, our committee quickly drafted legislation to fund emergency rental assistance programs, which was signed into law by President Trump and again by President Biden. So today, as the cryptocurrency markets melt down, the Financial Services Committee will once again be the leader in drafting legislation to protect consumers and investors while encouraging responsible innovation and safeguarding our financial system from the threats of unscrupulous actors in the crypto market. All of this work requires staff. I'm honored to have a staff that consists of the smartest, brightest, and most informed public policy professionals in Washington. They are true public servants and have strong values in advocating and legislating for policies that lift the most vulnerable. They worked tirelessly during the pandemic and transitioned seamlessly to a hybrid working environment, never once dropping a step. This is why I'm pleased that during our transition to the minority, the vast majority of staff were retained, and due to sound management of our committee funds at current funding levels, we do not foresee any pay cuts or furloughs. However, maintaining the status quo is simply not sufficient given the scale of the work in front of us. My chairman has laid out an ambitious agenda that will require us to increase our staffing and expenditures to ensure that we're able to properly engage with him on the important issues he means to take on. And while I don't foresee any pay cuts or furloughs at our current staff levels, we also don't have funding available for any pay raises or bonuses either. In addition, as the chairman has indicated, that he would like to hold field hearings, which I think are so very important. We would require additional funds to pay for the travel of staff and members to these events to ensure that Democratic members can participate. I'm also aware that he is planning a robust legislative and oversight agenda, which will require my staff to also work hard to keep up. In short, without additional funds, we will not be able to expand our operations or reward staff for their solid work through bonuses at the end of the year. Therefore, I certainly support the chairman's request for a 5% budget increase for our committee. This is a reasonable amount and will allow the entire committee to function at its full potential. While there are many things that the chairman and I will disagree on over the next 2 years, it should say a lot to this committee that funding and staffing is the one thing that we will always agree on. I strongly encourage the committee to appreciate and give additional weight to our unity on this important issue and to fund the committees accordingly. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Waters. In the attempt to make this more efficient than a financial services markup, the chair and ranking member will control 5 minutes in total each. I will now yield to Mr. Loudermilk for the purpose of asking questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman McHenry, we've had several conversations of the challenges that we face in the committee, one of those being the calendar. We have more work to do than we have time to do it, especially in the first quarter. What other challenges do you see facing Financial Services Committee?
Well, the combination of that tight calendar, the tight legislative calendar, and a big agenda, oversight agenda, legislative agenda, means that the staffing resources become foremost, right? So you have staff that has to work very intensely in a very narrow window. We marked out 12 bills yesterday in a 3-day work week. Right. We've had 6 committee hearings in 2 days, 6 subcommittee hearings in 2 days. In order to do that, you have to have staff commensurate with that. Then we find ourselves with the subscriptions that apparently media outlets have figured out that Congress doesn't know how to negotiate, and they try to pick us off committee by committee. And so we have the same problem in financial services. We want to make sure our staff has the best inputs, best information possible. So access to that information is really important. Bloomberg is the biggest racket. There's not standardized pricing. So what we have for financial services versus what you have at House Administration versus what the Ag Committee, there's no standardized pricing. They'll tell you what it is. So it's the oldest of old school rackets. Politico Pro, same thing. And they're looking for us as avenue to make their profits. And look, I'm not opposed to profits. We can have the debate about capitalism versus socialism and all this other stuff. But the fact is, we should get a value for our taxpayer dollars. And that's what I'm trying to do with staffing levels. That's what I'm trying to do with how we communicate with information and things of the sort.
Another area that's been a big focus in this Congress is oversight. How do you plan to ensure our oversight goals are met?
Well, first, we've hired talented staff, highly capable, very competent staff. And there's a lot of competition for that on the Republican side and the Democrat side, for that matter. But we've hired very well. The competitive pressures with a higher cap for Hill salaries also put pressure on our budget. We got to go compete. And we have very talented staff that can do very well outside of government service, but want to serve the American people and want to serve this institution. So that staffing pressure and the payroll pressure is real. We also have important software that's necessary. Clearwell and Concordance are two of the viable options. Concordance is like driving a beat-up Kia, Clearwell is like the brand-new BMW. What we kind of want to have for committee is like a Honda. Like, we just want to have like a mid-level, really reliable, good car, but nobody prices that. So making sure the software is there so you can go through these major document requests. And this is something both sides use. It's technology that's politically agnostic. But we want to make sure that, that software is available.
Okay. Very thorough with the answers. I think you answered all my other questions, and other than concern that you never brought up a Ford F-150, I yield back to the chairman.
I reserve the balance of the time. Yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, first of all, Chairman McHenry and Ranking Member Waters for being here and for your collaboration. I'm going to reserve my time and yield to Ms. Sewell.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member. First of all, let me just say, having been on the Financial Services Committee, it's a pleasure to not only see both of you here today, but also to reiterate the importance of your committee and importance of the funding of your committee. My question is actually with respect to the distribution of it. As I understand, most committees have 2/3 for the majority and 1/3 for the minority. I assume that that's the same in your committee as well. And I guess I just really want to understand if the 1/3 split gives the minority ranking member unfettered, unrestricted access to those resources, and would like to just understand that a little bit better.
Yes. Because of the two previous Congresses, there are things that I raised with Chairwoman Waters 4 years ago and 2 years ago that it was my intention to fix, because that's what I wanted at the time. And I've tried to meet that standard of whatever my complaint was 2 and 4 years ago, though modest, frankly. And on budget request and staffing, we actually have I think we've treated each other equity. She certainly treated me equitably, and her staff director treated my previous staff director and current staff director quite equitably, and the staff converses quite well on sharing of technology and things of that sort that we have to do, the basic functioning of the committee. The clerks have worked well together. All that stuff we've tried to make, as Chairwoman Waters offered to me, that same level of kind of agreement on those items, and I intend to follow that this Congress as well in our relationship. We can debate policy, and we want to do that, and frankly, we do that. A lot. But on this, as the ranking member said, we've at least have good alignment here, so we can then have those debates.
Ranking Member Waters, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, no, except that what you see between the two of us is a good working relationship. As a matter of fact, I think he has adequately described how we treat each other and how we respond to each other's requests. And so I'm here today in strong support of the request for a 5% increase. I think we're deserving. We have a very complicated and complex committee, and we didn't even talk about the work we must do dealing with all of Wall Street and all of our financial institutions. And of course, I'm looking forward, as the chairman is, to getting out on some field trips so that we really can understand.
Can I ask about those field trips, actually? I was wondering, I saw that the budget calls for 22 members and staff. Are they going to be bipartisan field trips? And so will we have good participation by both sides with respect to that?
That's my intention. That's my intention.
I think we should treat it the same way we treat Codell's, where we invite members from the opposite side to participate, and that's very important because as we travel across this country, it is important that we see it from different angles. And when Democrats go to some of the Republican areas, we learn something about what's going on in those communities. And of course, you know, one of my great hopes and wishes is that we have real bipartisan work on housing for rural and urban. And I want to go to both rural and urban communities with both sides of the committee and see what is going on and respond to those requests.
Well, thank you both for coming today, and I can tell you that getting out of Washington and into the field really is important, and just encourage you all to do what you can to both agree on where you go, but also making sure that it's truly bipartisan. Thank you, and I yield back.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here today. This concludes your testimony. Appreciate you coming in. We know the importance of the work the committee is going to do. We're definitely going to be looking into the subscription piece this Congress. We think we have some opportunities for dramatic improvements in that. Appreciate your commitment to restoring regular order and transparency to the American taxpayer.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, thank you for coming before us today. This is our commitment to restoring regular order to the House and transparency to the American taxpayer. We're going to give each of you up to 5 minutes for an opening statement. Then myself and the Ranking Member will each control a total of 5 minutes each for the purpose of asking questions. I'll now yield 5 minutes to Mr. Rogers for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Stout and Ranking Member Morelli, members of the committee, for having us here today. I'm here with Ranking Member Smith, my partner on the Armed Services Committee. We appreciate your consideration of our budget request for the 118th Congress. Rest assured, we take the expenditure of taxpayer dollars seriously. Every dollar entrusted to us will be used to advance our nation's security interest. The Armed Services Committee authorizes and oversees over half of all discretionary spending in the fiscal year, yet our committee is not funded accordingly. The growth of defense spending has outpaced HASC's ability to conduct proper oversight. The American people expect us to review every dollar the DoD gets and every authorization they use. For 62 straight years, our committee has produced an NDAA to implement oversight and authorize the DoD. That doesn't mean the task is easy. Members on both on and off the committee are more engaged in the process than ever before, which is great. During the FY 2020 NDA, members submitted around 1,000 proposals and nearly 1,200 amendments. Yet in FY 23, those numbers grew to 1,500 proposals and 2,100 amendments. The amount of effort and time it takes to evaluate all of those proposals outpace the amount of time our members and staff have. Thus, we are shortchanging this body and the American people. The Armed Services Committee has not seen a cap increase since 2009, yet the workload has exploded. This is one of the reasons we're seeking more staff. We cannot let the workload hamper the demands of the members on and off the committee. HASC has also permitted 7 legislative subcommittees in the House rules. In the last Congress, Chairman Smith, with my concurrence, created a 7th subcommittee. Yet we were not provided additional staff and resources to fully support that subcommittee. In fact, we took one subcommittee to help staff and fund the new one. With additional resources, we will be able to fully support members on these subcommittees. HASC also does not have a travel budget. This is a growing interest in holding field hearings across the country. Under our current budget, the committee doesn't have the ability to do that. We're seeking additional funding so that we could hold field hearings outside D.C. As members, we all know how important it is with the work we do. HASC is very fortunate to attract people that are predisposed to serve this country. On our staff, we have former fighter pilots, Marines, sailors, soldiers, PhDs, and lawyers. Don't hold it against us, we have lawyers. These people all are attractive to the executive branch and the private sector. We must be able to recruit and retain the best staff we can. A budget increase will ensure we have the staff to support our work our members require of them. And thank you for your consideration. Now I yield back.
Thank you very much, Chair Rogers. Ranking Member Smith, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Briefly, I agree with everything Chairman Rogers said. We've worked together on this for a long time. I have a statement which I will submit for the record. I just really want to emphasize the point about how the budget hasn't grown since 2009 for our committee, and in particular the importance of the staff. As the size of the defense budget and the oversight responsibilities have grown, that in it of itself is overwhelming. But then, as we all know, the NDAA has become a vehicle for a lot of other issues that aren't necessarily directly in our jurisdiction, which is fine. And by and large, the other committees work those issues, but it is still our staff that then has to make sure that we know what's going on when we put it into the bill. I mean, every year our staff members, they have the expertise that Chairman Rogers described, but then they get to become experts in all manner of different other issues that are coming their way. So at the end of the day, what we need more than anything is more staff in order to properly serve the House. I think it is outstanding that in our bill, pretty much all 435 members participate at one level or another. Chairman Rogers gave you the statistics on the volume of the amendments submitted. That's great. But we need the staff to be able to properly vet that and properly handle it. So I hope you will consider that request, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Smith. The Chair and the Ranking Member now each control 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions. I'll yield to Ms. Bice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it is great to see both of you at this committee this morning. You mentioned the additional staff members that you're requesting in this proposal, and having been on the new subcommittee that was created under HASC last year, City Subcommittee, we did a remarkable job, I think, with limited resources, and the staff was incredible to work with. But can you talk a little bit about why you think those additional 10 staff slots are needed, Mr. Chairman?
Well, because we've had to pull from existing subcommittees to do that. And as I said, since 2009, we haven't had any additional staff, and the volume of our work has exploded. So they were already strained, and I know everybody expects us to do good oversight. Well, the NDA is oversight. You know, nobody else in this body passes an authorization bill every year. In fact, nobody else in this body passes an authorization every decade. So we have enormous amounts of work in pulling staff away from existing subcommittees to take on this new responsibility, which is very important. As you know, the theater of warfighting is evolving, and having this specialized technology needs to be focused on, and we have to do that with these subcommittees, and we can't do it adequately, in my view, without additional staff.
Do you think that additional staff will help with oversight as well?
I know it will.
Mr. Ranking Member?
Again, I agree with everything you said. I mean, I think that the complexity that goes on here, just to give you one example, I mean, the Pentagon has not done a full audit, as we all know, which means literally they don't know for sure exactly all of the assets that they have. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because the Pentagon is the mother of all bureaucracies. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money. It's an enormous amount of responsibility. Our job is to try to make sure that they get to the point where they can do that audit, and in the meantime, monitor everything that they have even without that. And the level of expertise required in the staff, I mean, we all can come up with the ideas. We can say, we ought to do that, okay? And it's the staff that then has to dive into the code, dive into all manner of, I don't even know the terminology, to be perfectly honest with you, to understand the regulations and the law and the history, so how you can do that effectively. And that staff expertise is what makes our committee go, without question.
Absolutely. How has the increased participation in members crafting the NDAA and the significant increase in the number of amendments that are being submitted impacted the committee's ability to handle the legislative load?
It's been pretty overwhelming. You know, that again, I emphasize, we authorize over half of all discretionary spending. Just in its own jurisdiction, this bill is big. But because it passes every year and everybody knows that, the rest of the House depends on this vehicle for the larger body's legislative activities. So, like the ranking member said, the staff is expected to become experts in things other than just our subject matter, and we just are overwhelmed. We need more folks.
Yeah. The only thing I add to that is I remember, I think it was 2019, when, as these ideas keep coming in, we keep processing them through, and then of course we all also have to go through the floor. And I remember my staff telling me that there were, like, I think 2 parliamentarians in the House who literally quit. because, you know, you guys can come up with these ideas. We're the ones who have to write them and have to make them fit in there. And they were overwhelmed. They couldn't handle it. And the only finally I'll say about that, there's a part of this that's a really good thing. You know, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned, you know, the voice of the people and democracy and all that. It is an outstanding thing that all 435 members are participating in this process. It really is. It's good for our constituents. It's good for the country. It's good for how people perceive the legislative process. But we have to have the people in order to make sure that we can do it effectively without driving people to quit.
Well, having been a member of the House Armed Services Committee last Congress and sitting through the markup of the NDAA through dozens or hundreds of amendments, I agree with you wholeheartedly. My last and final question is, it is my understanding that you have invested in software to be able to manage the amendment process because there are so many amendments that are being submitted by members of this body. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that and why you've shared that with actually Senate Armed Services?
Yeah, that software has been really valuable to us. I don't know how we would have handled all that input, whether it's proposals or amendments, without it. But it also has a cost itself. This last year, because we had such a large uptick in amendments and proposals, we spent $600,000 to use that software, whereas we'd been spending like $150 to $200 before. So the software's great. I'm glad we got it, but it costs money to use it.
Personally, I miss the days of passing out all the papers so that by the end of the markup, you had a stack of paper under your desk all spread out all over the place. But the software is more efficient.
But the forest appreciate the fact that we don't do it anymore.
The forest does appreciate that. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for your time this morning. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
I now yield 5 minutes to Ms. Sewell for the purpose of asking questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a new member of HASC, I can truly attest to the fact that you both work very hard to work together, and the partnership is very important. I can also attest that we in the Alabama delegation are very proud of you, Mr. Chairman, as a fellow member of our delegation. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
So my question actually is really just about this, how you guys decide or utilize your budget. I understand that lots of committees do 2/3 of the budget go to the majority and 1/3 go to the minority. And so I just really want to understand how that's working and whether or not Mr. Smith, the Chairman, Ranking Member Smith, will have the opportunity to have unrestricted access to his 1/3.
Yeah, we have historically had a lot of professional staff that stay no matter which side's in the majority, and we've continued that practice, and I don't see us, I don't think we've done anything different this cycle than Chairman Smith did in the last cycle.
Yeah, and that's a crucial point. We don't do 2/3, 1/3. We have a general budget, and then we decide between us how to do that. And the overwhelming majority of our staff is viewed as bipartisan, and a number of people who worked in our majority in the previous Congress are now working in their majority. So again, it's not about partisanship on the committee. It's about expertise. Once you get people who have that knowledge that I keep talking about, like I said, it's not partisan. We need that expertise and that background and experience.
I look forward to utilizing this new software for my very first NDAA.
Pay for it, please.
And I just want to say what a pleasure it is to serve on a committee where there really is true partnership and bipartisanship. And we would want to see that in our national security and for our defense. And so thank you both for being who you are and continue the great work of this committee.
Thank you.
Senator Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your willingness to come and testify as we return to regular order. Have a wonderful day. Members of the committee are advised we're going to do one more panel before we travel down to votes. We're going to do this as efficiently as possible, and I know Chairman Green is a true believer in efficiency and will work with us to do that. Chair Green, Ranking Member Thompson, thank you for being with us today. This is our commitment to restoring regular order and providing transparency to the American people. We'll give each of you up to 5 minutes, no need to use it all, for your opening statement. Then myself and the Ranking Member will each control 5 minutes for questions. We may use less than that in full due to the pending votes. Chair Green, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee. I want to start by congratulating both of you for your respective appointments to lead this important committee, which plays a critical role in the daily operations that keep the House of Representatives running and, of course, our complex secure. In the 118th Congress, the Homeland Security Committee will expand our important work overseeing the Department of Homeland Security and its components, including Customs and Border Patrol, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the U.S. Border Patrol, the Transportation Security Administration, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and many others. DHS is the third largest department in the federal government with a $70 billion budget and around 250,000 employees. The mission of DHS is critical to protecting America from a litany of threats stemming from terrorism, adversarial cyber actors, the Chinese Communist Party, natural disasters, and of course the crisis along our southwest border. By investing in the Homeland Security Committee, you're making an investment in the security of the American people. Primarily, the committee's budget requests will be invested in recruiting and retaining the top talent needed to sustain an aggressive tempo of investigations, legislative development, and committee oversight activities. Additionally, the Committee on Homeland Security must maintain the resources needed to go where the mission takes us, across the homeland, to hear from those serving in the front lines. We've planned a robust cadence of site visits, field hearings, and investigative travel to hold DHS accountable and provide oversight to its wide and varying mission set. From our largest cities facing threats from terrorism to underserved rural communities facing natural disasters and everywhere in between. We will maintain a steady presence along our southwest border, which faces unprecedented challenges. We will also investigate the Chinese Communist Party's threats to our supply chain at our nation's commercial ports and DHS's role in enforcing provisions of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, and we will continue maturing the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency as it supports state and local government and private sector businesses across the country. But all this work requires the right investment for our mission. Thank you for taking the time to examine our funding requests, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thank you, Chair Green. Ranking Member Thompson, you're now recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Style, Ranking Member Morelli. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you to present and support my chairperson's funding request for fiscal year 2024. As you know, well, for me, it's my 20th year on the committee. We started as a select committee, got jurisdiction, and as the chair's already indicated, we're now the third largest committee in Congress with significant missions dealing with cybersecurity. We have to secure our air, land, and sea borders, emergency preparedness, response, and recovery. But more importantly, the people who work at this agency do the Lord's work. They respond to disasters in Selma, Alabama, which is ongoing right now, and it's a major undertaking. So our budget, there's no disagreement in the request from the chairman and myself. There are some areas we need to look at. Counter unmanned aerial surveillance, DHS countering weapons of mass destruction, as well as chemical plant security. We look forward to, with proper funding, to do the necessary oversight in these areas, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. I'll now take the chair's time and recognize Mr. De-Esposito for the purpose of asking questions.
Well, thank you. Chairman, one of the things as a new member of Homeland Security that I've appreciated most from your leadership thus far is your thought process and mission that we should have our ears open, eyes open, and boots on the ground, which is one of the reasons why in part of your budget you've scheduled so many field hearings, so many trips. Why do you believe that that's so necessary in order for us to accomplish our mission of keeping this great nation safe?
Well, it stems from two sources. First, the new speaker has basically said he wants to take Congress to the American people. And so all these field hearings, we have to cover the expense of that. But I also believe, you know, from my time in the military, if you don't have the right intelligence, you can't make a good decision. So we're going to put eyes and ears on the border. We're going to go to ports and look at our ports. We're going to go visit CISA and Cybercom and all these places and learn and know what's going on so we can all, both sides of the aisle, make informed decisions. So that's the purpose of that plus-up, and I appreciate your support of it.
Thank you, Chairman. My next question was going to be how your priorities are different this Congress than from the last Congress, but I think you answered that in the first question. Our speaker has laid out you know, a robust agenda for our committee. So I think that was answered. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Ms. Sewell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome. My question is really about the budget distribution. Just want to confirm that that this budget is a shared budget, and that 2/3 of it, a lot of committees do 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 majority, 1/3 minority. If you could just talk a little bit about that, and also just wanted to confirm that Ranking Member Thompson, I was about to say Chairman. Okay, Ranking Member Thompson.
Don't worry, I do it in committee. Because he was my chairman when I was a freshman, and so I think 2 or 3 times now I've called him chairman. So.
Absolutely. But will Representative Thompson have unfeathered, unrestricted access to his 1/3? And also I wanted to ask a question about the field hearings, but I'll wait to ask that next.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, we've kept that arrangement, and you know, Benny and I grew up about 40 miles from him in a little small town in Mississippi. We're going to work well together. We're going to disagree on some issues. I mean, that's the nature of the people who sent me here and the people who sent him here. But the last thing I'm going to do is disregard him, because if I do, I'm disregarding 760,000 Mississippians who decided to send him to Congress. So the last thing I will do is be that guy. So we're going to work well together, and that means on the budget too.
Great. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything
Well,
to add?
there's formula is the same. When I chaired, it was 2/3, 1/3, and that's what it is proposed in this budget request.
Very good. On field hearings, will there be bipartisan support at those field hearings? Will we have bipartisan staffing as well as an opportunity for all members to participate? And is that the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I hope that's how it works out. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the resources are there, the requests are there, and just as we would run a committee hearing here, we're going to do everything to run the committee exactly the same in those locations where we go remote. And that's the case with congressional delegations as well, where we're going on a fact-finding mission and not necessarily a hearing. We'll always have invites for both sides.
Mr. Thompson, anything?
Well, we look forward to it. I can say that Chairman's enthusiasm, we have to temper with reality. There are some areas people want to go. It takes a couple of days to get there, even in this country. So with proper notification and planning, we can make it happen.
Sounds great. Well, I know that both of you know that the task ahead is very important to this country, and we look forward to your continued partnership and support of each other. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. You guys have a big task in front of you. We have a serious crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border, and so I know you're going to be doing some field hearings, and so I hope we do have an opportunity to have a real bipartisan or nonpartisan look at the challenges we're facing there. I appreciate both of you testifying today, Ranking Member Thompson and Chairman Green. Thank you for being part of returning regular order to the House and transparency to American taxpayers. We'll rush to votes. This committee will be then coming back quickly following votes for our next panel of witnesses. This committee stands in recess subject to the call of the chair. The Committee on House Administration will come back to order. Mr. Guest, thank you very much for joining us. This is our commitment to returning to regular order and transparency to the American taxpayer. I know Ranking Member Morelli is moments away, but in cognizant of the tight timeline we have, we'll recognize you for 5 minutes for an opening statement. You don't have to use the whole time. Myself and the Ranking Member will each share 5 minutes total to ask questions. With that, I'll recognize you for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. In an effort to be efficient with your time, I'm going to condense down the opening statement that has been submitted for the record. First, I want to thank each of you for the work that you do, not only for Congress, but on behalf of the Committee on House Administration. Thank you for having me today to allow me to justify the budget request on the House Committee on Ethics. My partner on the Committee on Ethics, Ranking Member Susan Wild, was unable to join us today because of illness, but does agree with the recommendations that will be presented here today, and these recommendations were drafted originally by the nonpartisan staff that serve on this committee. As many of you know, Ethics Committee is unique, and so is our budget request. I can confirm again that everything that I'm going to be presenting before you today has the support not only of the nonpartisan staff, and as many of you are aware, Ethics Committee is an equally divided committee, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. The staff is nonpartisan in nature except for legal counsel that both I have and the ranking member. But all the staff is in fact nonpartisan, and so we do we work very hard to try to keep politics out of the Ethics Committee. Looking here, the opportunity to serve the House community continues to grow and modernize. To fulfill that opportunity, the Ethics Committee is requesting an additional $658,600, or a 17% increase in funding for 2023. That is to do two things specifically: to acquire additional technology to help modernize the committee's advisory resources, and to hire additional staff to assist with the increased caseload and the modernization process. Key to modernization is maintaining a current ethics manual. I'm sure that this is familiar with many of you, as we for many years have been operating under a 2008 House manual that I have here red in color. This was the manual that has existed for a number of years, but I'm proud to say that I have here with me today, and will be happy if anyone would like a copy, to present to you the 2022 House Ethics Manual. So it took a number of years to go from the red to the new version, but the committee staff has worked very diligently to bring the printed version up to date. And I'm proud of the work that they've done. Also is the fact that this is available online. We are doing everything within our possible to make sure that the information that we have there in the Ethics Committee is provided to members so that that information can be easily searched and easily accessed online. As there are future updates, we will immediately update the availability of that information online. Many of you may also be aware that as part of our recent rules package, that a task force will be established to conduct a comprehensive review of the House ethics rules. That is something that has not been done in more than 30 years. It is past overdue. And so part of the funding that we're requesting is going to be to assist those members, again, an equally appointed task force, half the members being appointed by the Speaker, the other half by the Majority Leader, to do what we believe is a very important comprehensive review. The rules, when they were written, many of those 30 years ago, did not take in some of the things that we deal with today. We are trying to move the rules into the 21st century and trying to make those rules easier for our members to be able to not only access by having that information online, but easier to follow. Very quickly, trying to make sure I touch on this. As it relates to 2024, I know that that was something that we were asked to address. At this point, we would be asking for additional funds in 2024 of a little over $240,000, or roughly a 5.4% increase. As it relates to the funding that we're requesting and the staff positions, these are staff positions that are currently authorized but are not funded. And so we're not asking for this committee to authorize additional staff just to fund staff positions that are currently at this time unfilled. House ethics, like many of the other House staff, because of the private sector and the executive, we're constantly losing good people to the executive branch. And we want to make sure that, if at all possible, we can maintain those people who have a wealth of knowledge, so that we're not constantly in this cycle of bringing new people in, training new people. Just as we get them where they're effective or efficient to be able to carry out their job duties, someone else comes in, pays them more money, and we lose them, and we start that process over and over again. So that's why we believe that. And again, the technology that we're asking for, Mr. Chairman, and
Mr. Chairman, on risk of cutting you off, I just want to make sure we're cognizant of time, and we'll take your full extended remarks into the record. I can feel your energy to make sure that this place is run in an ethical manner. We really appreciate the work. I don't think everybody always fully appreciates the time and effort that goes in to the members that serve on ethics, but in particular, the chair and the ranking member, the unique amount of time that you put in particular, Chairman Guest. If all right, I'm going to take the 5 minutes for the chair and yield to Dr. Murphy for questions. And then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Guest, for coming here. This is difficult to ask hard questions to ethics because, God forbid, I ever had to go before ethics. I just want to follow up. You've asked for a significant increase in funds. Can you elaborate a little bit into the uses and the needs for additional technology and how that's going to allow you to do your job better?
yeah, one of the things that we are going to strive to is to, we are required to provide annual training to members of Congress, to staff, and we would use this technology to bring some of that training into a modern day era. Much of what we've done before, and I know you've been and sat through much of that training, I think has been very unhelpful. We have sat there and basically read rules and maybe answered a few questions. We want to be able to bring in things that would help us with that training, to be able to have more presentations, to make it more engaging, to make it something that hopefully people will take away and remember some of that training versus just sitting through that training because they are required to do that as part of their annual educational requirements.
Okay, and you said you were going to basically look at rewriting the book?
That's right. There's a task force that has been, will be established, and we will completely.
Do you anticipate additional funds being needed to do that, or are you using other funds that you normally would have used to do that with staff resources, et cetera?
We intended to use the staff resources that we have to assist the task force.
Okay. And one last question. It has to go really with modernization. How do you guys anticipate, just talking about a little bit of follow-up you have with the members, what does that look like? How do I, as a member, receive your message a little bit more clearly in the future, and something that is a little bit more technologically savvy? What does that look like?
Again, we're going to try to make as much information as possible available online. We're going to start developing a series of short videos that members or staff members can watch of common questions. As we're putting forth information, you'll routinely get information that we send out on the pink sheet. Again, we do this as a way for this to stand out. But we're also putting things out there in different formats so that people can regularly understand that. One of the things that the committee is doing, and again, this is low-tech, and it is just developing checklists so that people have a better understanding of what the rules entail. The rules are very much like, there are rules, and then with many rules there are exceptions to the rules, such as the gift requirement. Members of Congress can't accept gifts unless, and there are a long laundry list of what those exceptions are. And so we want to make sure that information is available online, and that information is understandable for all members, because our hope is that we are like the Maytag repairman, that we're sitting around with nothing to do, and that we can focus, instead of on the investigative side, we can focus on the advice and the training.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have. You back.
Ms. Morelli is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Guest, I don't really have any questions. I appreciate your submission, appreciate the hard work that you have to do, and I know that I speak for the members here that for you and Ms. Wild, we're very grateful for your service. That I yield back.
Please.
Hi, Chairman. Thank you for coming to our committee. I just want to ask about the 10 vacant positions that you have on the committee. Are you having a tough time hiring people, or is it just folks that recently left?
Well, some of the vacancies are the fact that those positions are unfunded. We've recently lost 3 employees. One was appointed to the federal bench and was just recently confirmed. 2 others have left at the end of the last calendar year to take, unfortunately, better paying jobs. A lot of the staff members we have legal backgrounds, and so their salaries are going to be higher than people without those types of degrees. And so sometimes it has been difficult at times for us to attract good people with the salaries and the requirements that we're looking for. But right now, if I'm not mistaken, I think we are only down 3 positions that are currently funded, and Tom is nodding his head. That is correct.
Are you reassessing the salaries for the staff to ensure? I think you have 2 tough years ahead. Lots of things up in the air. I just want to make sure that, you are in a good place.
Yes, ma'am. And part of the request is not only to hire additional staff, but also to bring salaries up to a more competitive
Great.
level.
Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman. I know how much time and effort you put into ethics, and it is greatly appreciated by this committee and by the whole House. And thanks for participating in our work here to bring back regular order and transparency to the House. Have a great afternoon. Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal, thank you for joining us today. We're going to try to be efficient with your time. We'll give each of you 5 minutes for an opening statement. You don't have to use the whole time. Your written statement will be inserted into the record. Myself and the Ranking Member then will each control a total of 5 minutes each for questions by the panel. I'll now recognize you, Chairman Smith. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Morelli, members of the committee for having us and for the opportunity to appear before the House Administration Committee to discuss our funding request for the 118th Congress. Americans watching the hearing should know that the Ways and Means Committee will be fighting to help workers, seniors, job creators, and others struggling with the various challenges facing the American economy. Our committee will be focused on protecting American taxpayers and restoring transparency and accountability in their government. Whether that be shedding more light on the IRS, whether it's looking at the Department of Health and Human Services and concerns over its plans to restrict Medicare coverage for innovative medications, whether it's the Treasury Department and its ongoing negotiations of an international tax agreement without congressional approval, the absence of a more robust trade policy at USTR that is needed to protect the interests of American workers. Oversight over the IRS, an agency that has chronically damaged its own integrity and abused the trust of the American people, alone will consume a substantial amount of time and resources. The Ways and Means Committee also has a broad jurisdiction over the health and retirement security of America's seniors, including Medicare and Social Security. These programs need to be protected. These issues and others will mean this committee will need to spend substantial time executing on our oversight responsibility. Congress must serve as a check and balance against unrestrained executive power so that there is accountability and scrutiny of policies coming out of the White House. The new House Republican majority has made it our commitment to act boldly on their behalf, and our committee, particularly the Ways and Means Committee, are the tip of the spear. We will combat today's inflation crisis and looming debt crisis, secure our nation's supply chains, and promote greater economic, financial, health, and energy security for American families. When it comes to developing these solutions, we must humbly admit that we do not have all the answers here in Washington. As chairman, I've made it a priority to take the Ways and Means Committee work outside the halls of Congress, away from the politically connected voices of Washington lobbyists and into the communities of the American people whose voices have far too long been ignored. We will hold filled hearings across the country and already held the first at the beginning of February in Petersburg, West Virginia. We heard from small business owners about their struggles as well as their solutions. We will be in Oklahoma City next Tuesday to learn more about how to provide relief and deliver results for working families. More funding will be needed to ensure these voices, the voices of regular Americans, get heard, and so we can turn their ideas into policies that will make their lives better. Additionally, the committee will need to recruit and hire staff with experience and expertise needed to both carry out our constitutionally required oversight duties and also help legally craft the ideas brought back from our field hearings. New pay orders in the House give us a competing shot at attracting some of the top minds, but now we need the resources to be able to meet the moment. For all these concerns, the committee requests a 17% increase in our budget for 2023, and because today's inflation crisis appears to be continued to rage, as economists like Larry Summers and Jason Furman have warned, we request an additional 10% increase for 2024 in order to build on this year's work. We will look out for the American taxpayer, and our committee will respect the resources they give us to carry out our duties. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Ranking Member Neal, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the ranking member as well. I noticed there are 3 members of the Ways and Means Committee here. I think we've got a shot. So we are in support of the Ways and Means Committee budget submission. We were consulted on this, and we're pleased that the chairman sought our input. So I think there's broad unity here. I also want to acknowledge former Chairperson Zoe Lofgren for the increase in the last Congress. While previously we had received incremental increases, the Ways and Means Committee did receive an increase that put the allocation back to where it was in 2010. For some of us who have a long memory, up until 1994, members of the Ways and Means Committee, they had an allocation for an individual tax attorney or a CPA in their offices that was paid for from the Ways and Means budget. And I thought that that was very helpful to attracting the sort of talent that comes with very complicated matters and very complicated issues. Once that was eliminated, we saw kind of a downward spiral as to the funding for the committee, so we're grateful for what has happened recently. So for the first time in over a decade, we were able to offer competitive salaries and staff increases. I want to point something out as well. We worked within minority Republicans and signed 2 letters with then Ranking Member Brady asking to dip into the reserve fund. This was a first for our committee. Both times we gave the minority half instead of the usual 1/3. We thought that was very important for comity and also for amicability, and we will continue on that path in the minority as well. We understand there is no such thing in the modern age as a permanent majority. We want to make sure that we can continue to work together, again, on very technical issues. Our workload has surpassed that for which we've been funded. The current majority has asked for an increase in order to support field hearings. If there are any lessons that the historic pandemic taught us, it was clear that we would able ourselves to hold virtual hearings, that the committee might bring in witnesses to participate to make it a bit easier for the members as they want to participate fully in this process. I also would suggest that the Committee on Ways and Means has a long history of splitting the allocation, at 2/3, 1/3, and at this time, I'm pleased to report that this will remain the practice. It has been one place where both sides can come to an agreement, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. The chair now controls 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions, and I'll yield to Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Neal, appreciate your testimonies. Mr. Chairman, my question is going to be for you. You had mentioned in your budget submission that the committee is planning on purchasing document management software for this Congress. I mean, do you already know which document management software you will be purchasing, or are you in the process of researching different programs?
What we're looking at there is relatively is the document that we're looking at purchasing.
I yield back.
Do you have a question, Mr. Murphy? Yes, I sure do. I yield to Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, for serving on the second most illustrious committee. Oh, that's right.
Correction stated, noted.
I thank you. We have important work to do, and I appreciate both of you putting your full force and effort into this. The committee is an important one for the well-being of this nation. I do, in this time of budget overruns and budget deficits and impending debt ceilings, just want to make sure we're spending our money wisely, as I'm sure you both do. It's not a question of this, but it is noteworthy that we make sure that we understand that as the Ways and Means Committee, we are held to, I think, a little bit higher standard of making sure that our money is spent correctly. In that, I applaud the chairman's desire to take our committee out into the country, and I think it's very, very important that people see the work that we're doing. I would like, though, to make sure that we are spending our money wisely, and if you could speak to that, Chairman, just with these field hearings, these oversight hearings, to make sure that we are being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, especially in this times of budget crisis.
Thank you, Representative. Rest assured that we are attempting to spend diligently, appropriately on these field hearings. I do want to thank the House Admin Committee because our current field hearing that we're going to be having on Tuesday, you all were very helpful. Because our first field hearing that we had in West Virginia, we had an extra expense of roughly $10,000 because the House recording studio said no in coming 2 hours away, so we had to pay for it. And they tried to say it was because of the day that we were also in session that they would not be there. We have found it to be very convenient and fly in and fly out dates to do a field hearing. And so this one is also on Tuesday morning, and then we'll fly back. And you all helped accommodate that, which will save us at least $10,000 because the House recording studio is going to be a part of that hearing. So we're trying everything, but I also appreciate everything you all are doing to help with that.
Yeah, yes, sir. It is, substantial. If you look at the number here, we're asking for essentially in this 1/18th a 30% increase over the last 1/17th. That's a big number, and both goes with the chairman and the ranking member that we make sure that our money is spent appropriately. I think it goes without saying that that's an important thing for us, and we appreciate your diligence in that regard. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your commitment to particular doing the field hearings. I think it's really important to get outside of the echo chamber here in DC. And we stand committed to making sure that we're supporting your committee, but other committees as well, that are going to be on the road this Congress, and making sure that all the House entities are operating to the benefit of the committees, but ultimately to the American people. I will now yield 5 minutes to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Smith, thank you for being here. We had the privilege of serving together on the Budget Committee, and wish you all the best in your new responsibilities. And to Ranking Member Neal, who I think did a extraordinary job in your years as chair, and appreciate all that you continue to do. I am going to reserve time and yield to my colleague and friend and a member of the distinguished Ways and Means Committee, Ms. Sewell.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ranking Member. I want to welcome Chairman Smith and I have two chairmans, I'm sorry, Ranking Member Neal, for coming before the committee. I too sit on this illustrious and one of the oldest committee in Congress. We have huge responsibilities and jurisdictions that are under our watch. And I know that the budget has traditionally been 2/3 majority, 1/3 minority. And just want to assure, I think you said it in your opening, that you would honor that, but also that the ranking member would have unrestricted access to that budgeted amount.
So glad that you're on the best committee in Congress, too, Representative. But
I have two best committees.
But the intention is to operate how we've always done in the past. 6 weeks on the job, but definitely taking the guidance from the folks that have been in the past, and that's how it should be done.
Thanks. Chairman Neal?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to acknowledge, and I'm supportive of the chairman's request and the budget here, but these field hearings are going to be pricey. And this was accomplished in the past through subcommittees traveling. And Mr. Mills, when he was the chairman of the committee, he did not allow for subcommittees. And then Mr. Rostenkowski became the chairman, and subcommittees were embraced. And then Mr. Archer stayed with it, and Mr. Archer actually, as the chairman, he allocated time for the subcommittees to travel. And the subcommittees, because I think in each instance, the subcommittees for a specific purpose, they generate an awful lot of expertise. And I think it's helpful to the overall debate. Not to suggest for 1 second we don't want people to participate if they desire to, but this formerly was the role of subcommittees to participate in it, whether you're on the tax subcommittee or health or trade. I think that there's ample opportunity to pick, for example, key trade jurisdictions. I mean, you might want to visit the Port of Louisiana, New Orleans, or you might want to visit the largest port in America, Los Angeles. And I think on the tax subcommittee, you might want to participate with taking a lot of questions across the heartland of the country. So I think there's ample opportunity for some specialties to be embraced. But I do think that it's a reminder here that this is going to be costly as time goes on when you're moving the number of members and staff across the country.
Well, thank you. I do know that you all enjoy a tradition of bipartisan support on this committee. It's critically important that we continue to embrace that, and I know that both of you are committed to that. I also would just like to put in a shameless plug for continuing our bipartisan health and rural and underserved communities health task force, of which Arrington and Dr. I just went quite blank. Okay, was a part of it, so I think that that's something that was very well done. And Danny Davis was the member that I represented the rural part. Look, I think that the idea of going to the heartland and going into leaving the district and going straight to people is going to be very important. I too just want to make sure that we're utilizing our money wisely, and I know it's the hope that it's truly bipartisan and we all participate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and again, thank you both for being here today.
Thank you very much, Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Neal. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your transparency and commitment to returning to regular order. Have a wonderful afternoon. Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, thank you very much for being here. This is our commitment to making sure that we're returning the House to regular order and transparency for the American people. We'll give each of you up to 5 minutes for an opening statement. Myself and the Ranking Member then will each control 5 minutes total for questions from the panel. And so without ado, I'll recognize Chairman McCall for the purpose of an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on the funding needs of the Committee on Foreign Affairs for this Congress, along with my good friend, Ranking Member Meeks. Before I outline our budget request, I want to briefly Just tell you a little bit about the history of this committee. It goes back to the Continental Congress. Obviously, France and being an ally was a big issue, and I find interesting that Benjamin Franklin was the first chairman, along with Chairman Meeks, and I'm not making any comparison between Ben Franklin and the two of us, but I think it's very interesting from a historical standpoint. It really emphasizes how important, though, the committee is. We deal with issues of war and peace. We deal with issues regarding the AUMF, declarations of war. We have oversight of State Department, U.S. aid. We have export control jurisdiction. We sign off on all foreign military sales to our allies, and obviously with the situation in Ukraine, we've been very busy on that front. I believe that the world's becoming a more dangerous place. Before our eyes, all you have to do is turn the TV on to see what's happening. I just got back from Ukraine, by the way, Kyiv and Bucha and Poland, to see the Ukrainians being trained with the Leopard tanks to go in to fight Russian aggression. We had the China spy balloon issue. Chairman and I, or Ranking Member and I, still trying to adjust to the majority, I think, had a hearing on China and a markup, very bipartisan, with one exception on China and the threat that they pose to the United States. Also, Iran, North Korea. The world is becoming, I think, more and more dangerous from our foreign adversaries. And we want to make sure America is safe. And we are the voice of foreign policy for the House of Representatives. We are respectfully requesting a 13% budget increase for this Congress. This increase is in large part due to the creation of a 7th subcommittee, the Oversight and Accountability Subcommittee, with the hiring of additional 4 staffers for the majority and 1 for the minority, including several attorneys. We want to make sure that taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely and identify where it's not. We also would like to conduct field hearings that we can get into more detail, but since the pandemic, we haven't been able to do these, and I think it's important to go to our communities out there to show why the Foreign Affairs Committee is important, what we're doing. We'd like to hold our first one in New York with Ranking Member Meeks on the United Nations. We'd also like to hold one in Texas on research and development for our weapon systems, defense industrial base, and another one on Miami, as Miami is really the gateway to Latin America. We need to we're going to be very focused on China and the strategic competition and the great power competition that we find ourselves in today. We're witnessing right now the largest land invasion since World War II, and Chairman Xi and Putin are very much aligned, and we're seeing threatening action from Chairman Xi with respect to Taiwan and the Pacific. I harken back to my dad's generation. He's a World War II veteran, bombardier in a B-17. I haven't seen a threat to the European continent or Pacific area region since that time, since World War II, and the threat is certainly there. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. The Ranking Member Mr. Ranking Member Meeks is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Style, and thank you, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of this Committee on House Administration. I thank you for this opportunity to appear before the committee with Chairman McCall in support of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs budget request for the 118th Congress. And as Chairman McCall has indicated, we are a very important, I know the other committee was in here, but we are the very important committee of the House, giving out a message and the significance and importance of foreign affairs. For example, in the 117th Congress, the Foreign Affairs Committee conducted unprecedented oversight and pushed an ambitious legislative agenda, including moving a state authorization bill that was enacted for the first time in nearly 2 decades. And Chairman McCall has expressed through the committee oversight plan and the budget request an intention to pursue a state authorization for this Congress, tremendously important, and an oversight agenda that includes adding a 7th subcommittee
as well as robust plans for field hearings, as you heard, and I look forward to this work and believe an increased budget would enable the staffing and supporting resources to maximize the quality and output of our efforts. Our nation's national security interests are squarely at the center of the committee's jurisdiction at a time when global challenges will continue to require our most skilled staff and innovative thinking to reinforce our alliances and tackle issues like Russia's illegal war on Ukraine and strategic competition with China, as indicated by the chairman, and deepening our diplomatic engagement in our hemisphere and on the continent of Africa. The minority in the 117th Congress, and by past practice, controls 1/3 of the committee budget. And I appreciate and thank the chairman for his intention to honor that practice and allow me the autonomy to use the minority budget to best meet the unique needs that come with being in the minority. Unfortunately, because of a smaller budget, it makes it difficult to keep and have the talent that you need. So I'll close with just this. In the post-9/11 era, diplomacy and development have regrettably not received the attention and resources they deserve. That must change, and that is why I look forward to working with Chairman McCall and with your help to have the resources needed to get that message through.
Thank you very much. The chair and the ranking member will now each control 5 minutes from the chair's time. Chairman McCall, if I can ask you, looking back at last Congress, the total travel budget, I think, in actual expenditures is about $19,000. This year, you talked a little bit about how you want to utilize travel, getting out of Washington, D.C., $140,000. Could you dive into a little bit more about the importance of that and where you're looking at going inside of that? We spend a lot of time on this committee thinking about how we're going to support the vast number of committees that are going to actually travel outside of Washington. I think that's really important. We just had a conversation with Chairman Smith with Ways and Means about some opportunities for improvement. Can you just give us a little more color as to what you're doing?
And you know, because of COVID, we didn't really have a chance to do this, so that's why we asked for an increase. I think it's just important. I mean, these are the issues really facing the nation of war and peace. I think the American people deserve to know from their elected representatives what we're doing and engaging in foreign policy and how that impacts us here at home. Why is Ukraine important? Why is Taiwan important? Why are we doing the things we're doing overseas? And I think, again, the first trip we outlined was to New York. I think the United Nations is a very kind of a logical first step. I think Miami, to look at what's happening in Latin America, the threat of Chinese expansion. We have the migration phenomenon. We like to look at how we can impact Central America, for instance, Ms. Torres. In terms of private investment, this committee with State Department, we have the Development Finance Corporation, and we look at ways to get private investment in areas like Africa, as the ranking member mentioned, but also Central America, where we can raise the economies of scale that can help get to the root cause of the problem. Why are people fleeing Central and Latin America to come to the United States? And I think that would be an important hearing. Finally, our defense industrial base is broken. As you look at the weapons going into Ukraine and the ones I signed off on foreign military sales 3 years ago to go into Taiwan that have yet to go in country, in theater, and that's primarily because our defense industrial base is broken. We want to have a hearing that deals with not only semiconductors with the CHIPS Act that we were able to pass bipartisanly, but I'll talk about how we can look at hypersonic weapons, how we can look at development of new weapon systems that this country needs if we're going to defend ourselves from these rising tide of threats that we see primarily from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
Thank you very much. The work you guys are going to have in front of you over the next 2 years is absolutely essential for the sake of the country, and appreciate the work you guys are doing in that regard. I'll now yield 5 minutes to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman McCall and Ranking Member Meeks for being here. Appreciate your work, and I always appreciate my friend Greg Meeks, who I think represents the United Nations, because Queens is like the United Nations, and appreciate both your service. I do also want to echo what others have said and so appreciate. In an increasingly dangerous world, the more that we present a unified front to the world internationally about what America's priorities are, what our values are, and our complete commitment to democracy and self-governance and respecting the wishes of sovereign people is so important. So, want to just continue to thank you for your bipartisan work in what as I said, is an increasingly dangerous world. Thanks for the budget request. We're obviously, I think, grateful that you have an agreement between the two members on expenditures. In your submission, Mr. Chairman, you indicated that you didn't have any plans to change the self-determination of the minority in terms of spending their allocation. I just want to confirm that I understand that and appreciate your willingness to continue to respect that that division. And I gather we can rely on your commitment to do that.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to the ranking member, you have confidence that that's continued to be the case and will continue to be the case?
Yeah, no, Mr. McCall, we not only as chair and ranking member this go in the reverse last time, we developed a friendship. And we work closely together to try to make sure we understand diplomacy and we understand that at home and abroad. And so his commitment and his word, it means everything. And he's always given that word, and we've always likewise tried to make sure. So I have absolutely no hesitation, no doubt in my mind about his commitment to make sure that we continue that one-third, two-thirds piece.
Thank you. I'm going to reserve and just...
What you said is very important. Look, we're not going to agree on everything, but we'll agree to disagree. But I think when it comes to foreign policy, Elliot English say it stops at the water's edge. And I just think it's important if we're going to send a message to our adversaries that we try to be as united as possible. And I think we've done that. I think the chairman, ranking member and I have attempted to do that over the years. I think the 419-0 vote on the spy balloon was another good example of how we can. A united voice is always better than a divided one, because they love to see us divided along political lines. China would and Russia, and I don't want to fall in that trap.
No, I completely agree. And as you said, there's going to be differences between us. There'll be differences even within our own ranks. Each party has differences of opinion on how to do this, but ultimately, just recognizing the outside world, despite our differences, despite our challenges, we're unified in purpose about what the role of the United States is in the world and how we see the world order. So,
can I just say to that, because especially post 9/11, where diplomacy and development have regrettably not received the kind of attention and resources that I think that they deserve, and I believe that we're going to avoid wars and global threats, and we need to expand our soft power. That's what we do here, and increase America's competitiveness and global standing. And there's no committee, none, of greater importance to do that than HVAC.
well, and I would just say, and I'm going to yield to my friend Ms. Torres. I also think that in a world where we need to communicate the complexity of international relations, that things that might not be immediately obvious to the average citizen is really important. And the two of you and the other members of the committee have a real responsibility to educate people about the real multidimensional elements of foreign policy and how to protect our interests, even at times when there may be that people think there's a much simpler answer. So I appreciate that, and I do want to yield to Ms. Torres.
Thank you. I just want to thank both of you for being the face of Congress abroad, and to ask that as you continue to travel abroad, that we really need to focus and bring more people to the table to talk about the issue of refugees. It's a global issue that we must work together globally to address. And the other thing, I want to thank you for hosting HDP and continuing to support HDP. And with that, I will yield back.
Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, thanks for being here today. This is our commitment to return to regular order. Your testimony is helpful for us as we go to mark up the budgets next week. Thank you both for being here. and have a wonderful afternoon. To members of the committee, I want to thank you for all the work over the last 2 days. I also want to insert and seek unanimous consent that the written testimonies of the chair, of Vice Chair Luke DeMeyer, as well as Ranking Member Velazquez of the Committee on Small Business, will be made part of the record due to the votes they were unable to attend today. And as I mentioned yesterday, conducting these hearings is one of the most impactful roles of the committee. I think the staff in particular did a spectacular job on both the majority and minority side and House administration to keep this moving, and so we applaud all of the hard work that went in by the full team. Without objection, each member, including our witnesses, will have 5 legislative days to insert additional remarks into the record or to revise and extend their remarks. If there's no further business, I thank the members for their participation, and without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
He didn't hear you. Mr. Guest didn't hear you either. No. He had, no. Right, that's, I can't hear that. I can hear that. Yeah, that works. Okay. Heavier, yeah, that works.